In all my years of working with CPAs, I don't remember CPAs coming to me and saying, hey, here's what we're going to do next year, the year after, and the year after to cut your tax bill down.
What is the incentive? If someone is getting paid a percentage of all the tax savings, they're naturally going to push potentially a lot more aggressive strategies.
There's so many opportunities in the tax code for small business owners. The tax code was created for small business owners to help you and I and other small business owners save on taxes so that we can build our company, hire more people, drive the economy.
You really want to be looking for a tactician, someone who really understands the underlying policies, the sublimits, the language, the exclusions.
And you might be the only client that agent has who's in that situation. So they're not going to have a lot of experience with understanding what kind of coverages you need and what kind of claims might come your way. Good.
All right, Jim, we're back here, chapter 6.
All right.
We're going to talk through building your wealth wheel.
This is probably the, I know I've said this a couple times, like this might be the most important chapter in this book. I know I've said that more than once, but this might be the most important chapter in the book. And this is building your wealth wheel. And the problem that entrepreneurs have is every entrepreneur over their lifetime picks up an accountant, an attorney, maybe a couple insurance agents, a banker, maybe an investment advisor. And if you picture all these different professionals like spokes on a wheel, they're usually not all A players. They're not talking to each other. No one's holding them accountable. But the worst part is the entrepreneur sits in the middle of that wheel trying to manage that team of professionals when the entrepreneur doesn't have the time or the expertise in the areas like tax, legal, insurance, and investments. So we call that the financial flat tire because that lack of coordination and that lack of oversight and that lack of proactivity creates all kinds of problems, mistakes, and missed opportunities. And that's the key of this chapter, really, is fixing that financial flat tire.
Yep, turning the financial flat tire into the functional wealth wheel, as we like to say.
Yep.
And this really is the entire fractional family office model. It's putting someone, the linchpin partner, at the middle or in the middle of that wealth wheel. So then the entrepreneur gets to be outside of the wealth wheel, works directly with the linchpin partner. And this is all modeled based off of the billionaires who have a CEO of their family office.
Yep.
And so it's the exact same playbook, just scaled down to middle market entrepreneurs.
Very true.
Well, let's go through how, as an entrepreneur, we should actually look to build this wealth wheel out around ourselves and some of the different vetting and criteria we should be looking at. And I think the first place we should start is within where oftentimes money is flying over our hands, or really maybe I should say slipping through our fingers, which is when it comes to taxes. Because oftentimes what we see is that entrepreneurs are working with a tax historian, not a tax planner, and they do not have, that's one of the first gaps we oftentimes identify on the broken wealth wheel is the CPA.
Yeah, and that's normal in a lot of situations because CPAs are paid to file the returns, to tell you what you're supposed to pay in estimated tax payments. Sometimes they're right in that area, sometimes they're wrong. They're not paid for proactively looking at your situation and looking at the tax code and coming up with solutions and opportunities and ways you can pay less in money. And in all my years of working with CPAs, I don't remember CPAs coming to me and saying, hey, here's what we're going to do next year, the year after, and the year after to cut your tax bill down. It's usually looking in the rearview mirror and telling me, okay, here's what you owe. And if you owe more than you thought, congratulations, you did better than you thought last year. And of course, that's not going to help an entrepreneur who's running a business and making a lot of money.
Yep. And when we're looking at that, in the book here, we go through a lot of the different flags and the different things you need to be looking for when you're talking to a CPA. And oftentimes that it's not just about the tax preparation and those that are looking in the rearview mirror, but also some people that get paid success fees. And sometimes they call themselves tax strategists. But that's another thing you got to think through. What is the incentive? If someone is getting paid a percentage of all the tax savings, they're naturally going to push potentially a lot more aggressive strategies. And they're also not only pushing these aggressive strategies so they can make more money, they're pushing all of the audit risk onto you as a taxpayer. Because you may not know this, but when you sign your tax return, that is you verifying the accuracy of every single thing that is on that document, even if you've outsourced the preparation. And a lot of entrepreneurs don't understand that.
Yeah, and sometimes these organizations will say that they have audit protection, but who knows if they're going to be in business when you get audited, and who knows if they're actually going to support you or not. That's a big question. Yeah, you have to look out for those red flags on tax planning. On the other hand, you don't want to ignore it because there's so many opportunities in the tax code for small business owners. The tax code was created for small business owners to help you and I and other small business owners save on taxes so that we can build our company, hire more people, drive the economy. All of that stuff happens. And that's in the tax code. It's built that way.
All right, let's talk through estate planning attorneys. So one of the things here is that it's really important that every entrepreneur has that plan put in place. How are they going to transfer not only their money and their things to future generations, but their values and their beliefs? And we talked about that in chapter 4. But when it comes to partnering with the right estate attorney, it's important that really you want to make sure that this estate attorney understands you as an individual. What are your values, your goals, your key relationships, where you're at now and where you want to go? Because the biggest risk here is that you get set up with just overly templatized documents that are just boilerplate that you don't really understand and that are not customized to achieve the specific goals you want for yourself and your family.
Yeah, very true. And when it comes to an estate planning attorney, unfortunately, age matters. You probably don't want a 70-year-old estate planning attorney because probably that attorney is not going to be practicing when your family needs that attorney most. And you also don't want someone fresh out of law school who's just trying to figure it out. So you want someone with experience, but also someone who isn't at the age where they're going to age out on you.
Yep. All right. Talking through investment management. So investment advisors, this is a place where oftentimes we see entrepreneurs just chasing big brands. There's a reason they're a big brand because they've got great branding and they spend a lot on marketing. Generally, it also means they're a little bit more expensive and maybe you're overpaying for what you're getting. Now, a lot of the different studies will tell you that investment advisors actually, after fees, cost you more money than what they're going to make you, but they can provide a lot of value in terms of some of the behavioral finance, cash flow planning, and other planning areas or other planning topics. But when you're talking to entrepreneurs, how would you help them understand if the investment advisor they're working with is an A player or a C player?
Yeah, well, the first thing is most investment advisors don't have a specialty in working with entrepreneurs. So they're going to do the same thing with you as an entrepreneur as they're going to do for the 75-year-old retiree. And you have a whole different set of problems and opportunities. And that's the same thing with investment management, because investment management, we always mimic what the billionaires do. And they're not going to be just in traditional stocks and bonds. They're going to be in private equity. They're going to be in oil and gas. They're going to be in some other things that, unfortunately, if you get through a financial advisor, they're getting paid a success fee or a finder's fee or a commission on those products. And then that creates a problem with the incentives. I think, Charlie Munger, I believe he said, show me the incentives, I'll show you the outcome. That is so true in everywhere. I was recently speaking at an event and one of the large private banks was speaking. We're sharing the stage and they were talking about how they're fiduciaries and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, they are fiduciaries for probably 10% of the time that they're working with a client, but they're also not fiduciaries a lot of other times. And there's all these conflicts of interest. And interestingly enough, a bank, whether it's a private bank or a regular bank, they're an adversary to you as a business owner by nature. And that is because when someone's loaning you money, they want more collateral and they want a higher interest rate. You're on the opposite side of the table as a banker. And for a banker to say, hey, we're actually on your side, that actually doesn't communicate the conflicts of interest. So whether it's a private bank, a brokerage firm, or even independent RIAs may have conflicts of interest that you need to know about. Their people could be insurance licensed. They could get paid for private deals. They could get paid in a lot of ways you don't see, and that creates a problem. So you want to make sure that whoever you're getting help from in every part of the wheel, but especially in the investment advice, the incentives are aligned with yours so that you can count on the advice that you can trust.
Let's talk through here. Let's go through the corporate counsel. That's the next one on the list here. This is going to be your corporate attorney, your general counsel. And one thing that I think that's really important here when looking at counsel is sometimes entrepreneurs get a little bit too fixated on what the hourly rate is for their corporate counsel, because this is going to be their go-to fixer for a lot of the basic things, whether it's litigation, whether it's reviewing different documents, NDAs, etc. But oftentimes what they miss is the specialization and the efficiency of this corporate counsel, because if this attorney is a specialist in your industry, in your specific case, it may take them actually way less time. And so although it's a higher hourly rate, you actually could come out with a cheaper solution than going with a lower hourly rate, but someone who needs to spend a lot more time getting spun up on what's going on within your industry and within your specific business.
Yeah, one thing I'm seeing a lot, and I know you are too, is I see entrepreneurs who are saying, I don't need a corporate attorney, I'm just going to use AI. And here's what I think. I think using AI in conjunction with an attorney is a great strategy. Run it through, give an example to the attorney. Here's what I'm thinking of. Here's a draft document. Taking it back to AI. Here's what the attorney says. I'm all for that. But not having an attorney at all involved in these corporate transactions and reviewing documents and everything else, I think is a big mistake, because we know AI can hallucinate, AI can make mistakes, and there's no law license to fall back on if there's a mistake that's made.
Yep. All right, we're talking about insurance advisors next. So these are risk managers. Now, these insurance advisors generally get paid a certain percentage, and their commission is based off of the premiums that go in. But so there's an incentive there for them to potentially push more insurance and overinsure you. But at the same time, you as the entrepreneur need to make sure you're not underinsured when it comes to your house, your cars, your liability protection, and then also on the business side, making sure you got the right general liability, you got the right completed operations, employment practice liability, cyber, etc. So what are the things that you're looking for when you're interviewing different insurance advisors to see, hey, do I have the right person on my team?
Yeah, well, definitely you want to see experience. People who are new to this is not comforting. You want to have people who've been around and seen a lot. You also want to make sure that they have access to different types of policies and different companies. So you can have a captive agent depending on the carrier, if it's a really good carrier. But in that case, you're probably going to want to occasionally check with a different carrier. Because although sometimes when you have a broker who shops a bunch of policies, they'll put together different carriers for different coverages and not understand how those policies work together. Whereas if you had someone who worked with one carrier, they would understand it's all under one umbrella. So that's an advantage. On the other hand, if you're with one carrier, they're not going to shop you out there in the market, and they're not going to look at other companies. And again, that's that linchpin partner to make sure that you do that. And then also a personality you can work with, someone who pays attention, someone who's proactive, someone who actually is going to give you good advice on the insurance policies.
Yeah, and I see a lot in this space that there's really low barriers to entry to be an insurance agent and an insurance advisor. You have to pass a relatively basic test at the state level, and there's a huge discrepancy in the technical aptitude between different insurance agents and advisors.
Yep.
And it's far too often because the more insurance you sell, the more you get paid. It really lends itself to like a business development role, and you really want to be looking for a tactician, someone who really understands the underlying policies, the sublimits, the language, the exclusions. That's really what you're looking for. Not necessarily the person who's the best at sales and that butters you up, because that person is just selling the policies and moving on. But then you have insurance because when you file the claim, you want to make sure that you've got the right insurance and that you're protected and the insurance is going to pay out. And far too often that's not the case because the agent doesn't really understand your business, or they don't really understand the policy they sold you into. They just sold it and moved on.
Or you've stayed with your same agent for years and you went from an entrepreneur making 50 grand a year to making $5 million a year, and you might be the only client that agent has who's in that situation. So they're not going to have a lot of experience with understanding what kind of coverages you need and what kind of claims might come your way.
Yep. All right. Well, let's wrap up with the bankers. When we're talking through bankers, financiers, etc., this is a space where having a deep, intimate relationship for a long time can pay massive dividends. Unfortunately, with some of these big banks, you feel like you're just a number and you're not important. Sometimes at the regional banks or the local banks, it's a little bit different, or the credit unions. But having a deep, intimate relationship with your banker can go a long way. And I know that we see this all the time, especially when it comes to ESOPs, when entrepreneurs are selling and doing an employee stock ownership plan. If they want to get some debt or some leverage, having that deep banking relationship, someone who's trust them, watch them grow, can pay handsome dividends.
It does matter, and that's where in a perfect world, I kind of like more than one banking relationship that is long term and that you have a good, and one might be a big bank, one of these like can't fail type banks, but also something regional or local where you can have much more impact, because I can tell you the big banks, whoever you're talking to locally has no influence on the decision making at the top. So if there's a problem, they're going back probably just to the way they handle everybody, and you're not going to get any special deal. On the other hand, big banks have certain security. So ideally, two banking relationships that you want to go deep with once you get to a high enough level as an entrepreneur.
Yep. All right. And then as an entrepreneur, this entire team needs to be managed by somebody. And so maybe that you think that should be you, but I would beg you to then go back and listen to chapter 5 and understand the time energy shield. And is this the best use of your time? And it's the who, not the how. But that's the whole fractional family office model, is then not only sourcing and vetting and this entire team, but then also leading the proactive communication, the proactive strategies with this entire team to ensure that everything is getting implemented on your behalf.
Yeah, and it's accountability too. If you don't know what an insurance agent's supposed to be doing or what policies are supposed to look like, or you don't understand how to read the tax return, or you don't know how provisions are drafted in a certain trust, you need someone on your team who can coordinate all those things to make sure there aren't mistakes and that you're not missing opportunities.
Yep, well said. Okay, that's it for this chapter here of the Wealth Wheel. We'll see you back for Chapter 7, talking about the linchpin partner or the CEO of the Fractional Family Office.
Sounds good.
Thanks for listening to the Make Rich Real podcast, where million-dollar businesses meet billionaire strategies. Please note the following disclosure. This podcast is provided by Dew Wealth Management, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Registration with the SEC does not imply a certain level of skill or training. The information presented in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only and should not be construed as personalized investment advice, tax advice, or legal advice, or a recommendation to buy or sell any security. Nothing discussed in this podcast constitutes a solicitation or offer to provide investment advisory services to any person in any jurisdiction where such solicitation or offer would be unlawful under the securities law of such jurisdiction. All information presented is believed to be reliable, but is not guaranteed for accuracy or completeness. All investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Past performance, if mentioned, is not indicative of future results, and no investment strategy can guarantee profit or loss. Any mention of specific securities, investment strategies, or market performance is for illustrative purposes only and should not be considered a recommendation. Economic and market conditions are subject to change, and any opinions expressed are currently only as of the date of this recording. Before making any investment decisions, please consult with a qualified financial professional who can assess your individual circumstances, risk tolerance, and investment objectives. For more information about our services and fees, please refer to our ADV Part 2A, which is available at our website, dewwealth.com, or upon request.